There was a certain king, a sultan, and he was married to a woman he loved deeply. This woman meant everything to him. He'd make sure he woke up in the morning before she woke up so he could watch her eyes open for the first time. And then at the end of the day, he always stayed awake until after her eyes had closed and she had drifted off to sleep. In between, all he did was think about her. He rushed through his day to come home and spend as much time as he could with her. But one time he came to her and he said, "I've got some terrible news." And she said, "What?" He said, "I have to go away for 3 days to do some sultan work." And he said, "But I promise I will work as fast as I can and try to get home as early as possible on that 3rd day." She said, "Well, all right." So he went away to do his sultan work. And just like he said, he worked very hard to get done as quickly as possible. And he was able to finish late in the afternoon on the 2nd day. So he came back to the palace and he rushed into his quarters, hoping to get the embrace of this beautiful woman. But what did he see? There she was with one of the servants in a very compromising position. He was crushed. He was angry. He was hurt. He called in the guard and the 2 of them were dragged away. And as the sun came up the next morning, he had them both beheaded. Then as the day wore on, he sat in his throne room on the throne and he sulked. He was angry, he was hurt, but he was also lonely. So finally he got up early in the afternoon and he walked out into the streets of the city. And he walked until he found a beautiful woman and he said, "Would you like to be the wife of the Sultan?" And she said, "Well, of course." So they came back and there was a big feast and a celebration. And that night the 2 of them went into the Sultan's quarters and they frolicked. But as she fell asleep next to him, he realized, women can hurt. "I will never let another woman hurt me like that one hurt me," he said. So very early in the morning, before the sun came up, he got up and summoned the guard. And the guard took the woman, dragged her away, and as the sun came up, she was beheaded. Again, as the day wore on, he sat in his throne room and sulked. He was hurt, he was angry, and he was lonely. So again he got up and he went on out into the streets of the city and he walked until he found a beautiful woman. And he said, "Would you like to be the wife of the Sultan?" And she said, "Well, of course." So they came back to the palace, there was the feast, they went in and frolicked. But that night again, he remembered, women can hurt. So again he summoned the guard and the guard took her away before the sun came up. And just as the sun was rising, she too was beheaded. Day after day it went like this until you can imagine that the supply of single beautiful women in the city was beginning to dwindle. And one day he came out and found no one. So now in the afternoon he's in his throne room and he's really unhappy. And that's when his vizier, his prime minister, came in. And the vizier said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "I could find no one to marry." And the vizier said, "Oh." And then the Sultan said, "Wait a minute. You have a daughter, don't you?" And the vizier said, "Yes." And the Sultan said, "She's very beautiful, isn't she?" And the vizier said, "Yes." And the Sultan says, "I'd like to marry her." And the vizier, he didn't know what to say, so he sort of backed out and got out, ran back to his own apartment, and he burst in and his daughter was there and he said, "A terrible thing has happened." She said, "What?" He said, "The Sultan wants to marry you." And she said, "What did you tell him?" And he said, "I didn't say anything." What was I supposed to say? "Well, of course," and hand my daughter over to the executioner, or say, "Under no circumstances, in which case you and I would be going to the executioner together." I didn't know what to say. She said, "Good. I'll do this." And she walked back to the Sultan's palace and walked into his throne room and she said, "I'll marry you." And that afternoon there was the feast, and that night in the Sultan's quarters they frolicked. And then afterwards she said, "Would you like to hear a story?" He said, "Well, all right." And I don't know which story she began with. It could have been Sinbad the Sailor, or it could have been the story of Aladdin. I just don't remember. But I do know that the story was a captivating experience. But when she got to that place in the story where everything's about to come together, she said, "I'm sleepy. Can I finish this tomorrow?" He said, "Well, all right." And of course the next morning went differently. And all day long, all he could think about was, how did that story end? How did that story end? And that afternoon there was a feast, and that night they frolicked again. And there, lying on the pillows, the Sultan said, the story, how does the story end? And she said, oh yes. And she finished. And as he was lying there, savoring the ending of that story, she said, would you like to hear another one? And he said, well, of course. And I don't know which story she told second. It could have been the story of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. It could have been the story of Abu Hassan and the historic fart, and that's a real story. Whatever it was, she got to that place where the story was all about to come together, and she said, I'm really sleepy. Can I finish this tomorrow? And he said, all right. And again, the next day, all he could think about was that story. And that night, with the feast, the frolicking, and on the pillows, he said, the story. And she said, oh yes. And as soon as she finished that one and he was savoring it, she said, would you like to hear another? Day in and day out, it went like this. She always finished the story from the night before and began a new one, but she was always too sleepy to finish that second story that night. And this went on for 1,000 nights. And then on the 1,001st night, she finished the story. And the Sultan said, do you have another? And she said, you can kill me now. And he said, what? She said, I'm out of stories. You can kill me like you did those others. And the Sultan looked at her and said, I can't do that. He said, I'm not the same person I was 1,001 nights ago. I could never do to another woman what I did to those women. Your stories have changed me. And he said, besides, we have 3 years we've spent together. We have 3 sons. No, I'm a changed person. And so it was that the Sultan and Scheherazade spent the rest of their days together. And I'm under the impression she might have told some stories a second time. And that is my story.